Welcome! This is another episode in my NIV Bible reading series. Oh, this is another video of my NIV Bible reading series. NIV stands for New International Version, and in this video I'm going to be reading through Exodus chapter 19. So let's see. In the previous chapter, Moses' father-in-law visited and brought him his wife and kids and stuff like that. And then his name is Jethro, and Jethro advised Moses to stop. Anyway, Jethro advised Moses to let's see, what's the word? To separate his responsibilities, or to spread out his responsibility to not just himself but to others. So at the time beforehand, Moses everyone came to Moses for everything. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I know. But Jethro saw that. I was like, well, why don't you appoint judges and stuff like that to oversee the smaller problems, and the big problems they can still take to you, so it lightens your load. And that makes sense to me. That's kind of how government and states and stuff like that work. I'm in the U.S., so you have the federal government and you have the states, and then the districts and stuff like that, and towns and stuff like that. And so in chapter 19, basically, this is the start where Moses goes up to Mount Sinai, and most people that aren't even religious, they know this story, or at least somewhat familiar with it. Moses up on the mount, getting the stone tablets with the commandments on it and stuff like that. This is what this is going to be, as far if I remember correctly. But let's just get into it. In the third month after the Israelites left Egypt, on the very day they came to the desert of Sinai. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the house of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you are to speak to the Israelites." So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, "I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you." Then Moses told the Lord what the people had said, and the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, 'Be careful that you do not go up the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. He shall surely be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on him. Whether man or animal, he shall not be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they go up to the mountain.' After Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he consecrated them, and they washed their clothes. Then he said to the people, 'Prepare yourselves for the third day. Abstain from sexual relations.' On the morning of the third day there was thunder and lightning, with a thick cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. When Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace. The whole mountain trembled violently, and the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. When Moses spoke, and the voice of God, then Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. The Lord descended up to the top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. So Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, "Go down and warn the people so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish. Even the priests who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them." Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up Mount Sinai because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy." The Lord replied, "Go down and bring Aaron up with you, but the priests and the people must not force their way through to come up to the Lord, or he will break out against them." So Moses went down to the people and told them. Okay, so we didn't quite get to the commandments. So let's see. Yeah, so the commandments is start getting into that in chapter 20, which that'll be for next time. I've already read, well, not in this Bible, but in the New King James Version, I've read all the way up through 28, Exodus 28. But in this one, I've only read through 19. But I'm pretty sure it's similar. I'll try and keep an eye out for any a lot significant differences in there that, of course, would need to be questioned, or at least pointed out, and stuff like that. And I would ask that my pastor about that, of course. But yeah, that was Exodus chapter 19. So yeah, getting ready for the mount. It's a very very big event. So basically, for the next, so you have chapter 20. You got the 10 Commandments, and then starts getting the laws all the way through. I think through 23, and then through 24, 25, 26, and 27. Let me see. Oh, I read through 27, not 28. Yeah, through 28. All right. Yeah, so that's where they start getting into the tabernacle, the rules, and like the specific. God is saying the specific rules of the tabernacle creation and the what's it called, the Ark of the Covenant creation, and stuff like that. Just it starts getting into like the specific regulations that God had for the Jews at that time in the Old Testament, and Moses and all that stuff. And he says like, oh yeah, the altar as well at 27. But far from there, it's gonna be like a whole another week before we get there. Before I get there in videos, at least. But yeah, that's it. Um, I guess I do want to stress that these laws with the tabernacle and the stuff coming up, the tabernacle and the burnt offerings and all that stuff, that was done under the Old Testament. With that stuff, we don't do that anymore. As Christians, we don't do that because that stuff. Uh, you can. I mean, I guess. I mean, God's not going to stop you from doing it, but you don't get more grace from God by doing these stuff like the tabernacle and stuff like that. Because Jesus, uh, when Jesus came, that kind of did away with that and stuff like that. So the Ten Commandments, though, they're always a thing. Ten Commandments. That's you still gotta follow those. But like the tabernacle, the burnt offerings and stuff. You don't need. We don't. You don't. As Christians, you don't. You don't do burnt offerings. Christ was the offering. Jesus Christ was the offering. He died for our sins. You don't need to do that. So Christ is in Christ. You don't need a tabernacle because Christ is the mediator. You don't need a tabernacle anymore. You have from what I understand, that Christ is the mediator. Was a sacrifice. So no burnt offerings, no tabernacle. So yeah, making sure you got whoever watches this, because I can see if you just started from the beginning, then you're like, whoa, am I supposed to do all this? And stuff like that. Well, no, back then, yes, but not right now, because of all the other events that happened. So I guess yeah, it would be better to. Cause I've been thinking about that. Could you read from the beginning or the end, or like start with the? I feel like if you are gonna start the Bible, because well, I mean, I have a Bible reading program and stuff, but that I do from the book from the different Bible reading programs and stuff. The one I got, uh, really like you have 3 tracks. You have track one, like it's spread in like it's like 6 weeks in sets of 2 weeks, 2 week sets. So life and teachings of Jesus, 2 weeks on the life and teaching of Jesus, 2 weeks on the life and teaching of Paul, 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks on the Old Testament, which he gives like 14 verses on the Old Testament. But I think there's like a message there. If you're a starting Christian, you should probably like read like some of the Gospels first, maybe like read some of the New Testament first, like and stuff like that. Learn about Jesus first because he's him and what he says is what we follow is like mostly what we follow now. I see, as far as I know, because some of the stuff in the Old Testament was nullified when Jesus came. So I definitely think you should read the Gospels and stuff like that before go and then go to the old and then start going to the Old Testament and stuff like that, or and stuff like that. Just so it's just better that way. I would think, but I'm no Bible scholar or anything like that. I'm not of I'm at the bottom of I guess would be authority, I suppose. Like I'm no pastor or priest or whatever. I'm just giving my thoughts here, and stuff like that based on like the I don't know what's it. It's really October already, so what about at most 10 months of of really embracing religion and Christianity and stuff like that, and yeah. Let me see. Did they? I'm looking at the other stuff, track reading stuff. Let me see what did they do. So the 6 month track reading program does go through various chapters of Genesis, and then goes the New Testament. I'm just trying to see what they. So they have you read all of Mark. Which makes sense because apparently Mark is like a condensed version. It doesn't have any of the extra stuff that Luke and Matthew have. And I don't know about Luke, but I did just finish reading through Matthew, and yeah, Matthew does have some extra stuff, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. I think is a good thing. I like extra and stuff, but it seems like from in this book that I have, Mark, it's described. There's like introductions and this and like my student Bible and stuff. said Mark is like kind of like a movie or whatever, so it goes like super fast and stuff like that. It doesn't talk about like the origin of Jesus like Matthew does. It just gets straight into it, like John the Baptist, all that stuff. And I've already only read the first two chapters of Mark. I'm on Mark right now as one of my side reading programs. But yeah, all right, that's it. I'm going to end it here.